Hi, everyone. Welcome to our 11th monthly Lake Org Chat. As an outreach program of the College of Natural Resources at UW-Stevens Point, our goal is to provide educational resources and support to the broader community in regard to lake health. As you probably know, Wisconsin is home to over 15,000 lakes, and there are over 750 lake organizations representing almost 1,000 of these lakes. These organizations help to protect and manage the health of lakes and entire watersheds for current and future generations. We try to get important and timely information out in a variety of ways. And this year, we've been recording monthly Lake Org chats to get this information to you in an engaging way. Please let us know how we're doing by completing the feedback form linked on YouTube. We hope you'll join us for the final episode next month focused on succession planning, and be sure to take a look at the past episodes as well. In this episode, we will be discussing the benefits of countywide lake organizations, why every county should have one, and why every individual lake organization should participate in and be members of their countywide organization. We'll get into those details in a bit, but first, let me introduce myself. I'm Sarah Winju, Leadership and Capacity Development Specialist for Extension Lakes at UW-Stevens Point, and I help to facilitate these chats each month. We are joined by Dave Quady, who has been part of most of these monthly chats, has been a strong supporter of our organizational capacity work, and is one of my go-to people when I have questions or need advice regarding lake associations. Dave, please introduce yourself.
Thanks, Sarah. I am honored to work with the Sand Lake Association and its members. Sand Lake is in Rusk County and Chippewa counties. I'm also a proud graduate of Lake Leaders Institute crew number 15 and a member of the Capacity Committee. Eric?
Yeah, I'm Eric Olson. I'm the Director of Extension Lakes based here at UW-Stevens Point, and I help facilitate these conversations each month. And I'm pleased to introduce a special guest joining us to talk about countywide groups, Ted Ralsa. Ted is with the Oneida County Lakes and Rivers Association. Do you want to introduce yourself, Ted?
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I'm Ted Ralsey. I'm president of the United County Lakes and Rivers Association. I'm also a graduate of Lake Leaders Crew 11, and I write books and other materials about lakes. Some people call me the lake guy. I live on Birch Lake in Oneida County.
Glad you can join us today, Ted. So there are a list of countywide organizations listed here, and this is what we have that we know of. This is what we know exists in Wisconsin. So if you have a countywide lake organization that isn't listed on here, please let us know so we can get you added to our lake list directory. We wanted to talk a little bit about names here, and you'll notice there's a lot of different types of names for these countywide organizations. Some of them have alliance, some of them are forums, some of them are councils, and others are associations. And we think that's just a preference, and others jump in if you have other things to say about the names. But I think it's just interesting here, if we're looking at this list of organizations, how many of them have lakes, are focused maybe only on lakes. Others have lakes and rivers, lakes and streams. Some are waterways associations. So it's a really neat, diverse listing of how countywide organizations, how they've named themselves and maybe what they represent and what they work on.
Yeah, and I think some of these, we actually have 22 counties represented here in this list because Menominee and Shawano County are together with the waterways of Menominee and Shawano counties, WAMSCO. And, maybe not every county is going to have a lake and river association. In the driftless area in southwest Wisconsin, there's not a lot of lakes. But there certainly are some places where maybe we would hear from people that are looking to start a new organization, and our discussion is sort of meant to help you out as you're navigating this, or maybe you're trying to reinvigorate a countywide group. Some places really all they have is sort of an informal entity. Here in Portage County, where I live and work from, Portage County does not really have a Lake and River Association, even though we have a large section of the Wisconsin River coming right through the county, in the middle of the county. And we have a handful of lakes, and some of them have lake districts and some have lake associations. But so far, they just haven't come together as sort of a countywide group. We'll talk about sort of, what are the benefits of doing this and why would you consider this as we go through today's talk. But it really kind of how active these groups are is a function largely of who steps up and who wants to participate.
And I'm going to attempt to bring up our lake list directory right now. Can you
I
see
can
that?
see it. It worked. Yes.
All right. Well, let's hope that it works on the recording. So this is our lake list directory found on our website, and this is how you can access those countywide groups and also find direct contacts for them. So what I did is I just put, well, you can go to a county specifically, or just put county in the organization name, and it should bring up a lot of different county specific. Here's Adams County Lake Alliance, Bayfield County Lakes Forum. So this is a place that you can go to find all of those countywide organizations. Let's go to Oneida County Lakes and Rivers Association, since we have Ted here. And we'll see Ted listed here as the president with an address and a phone number. So we have all of the contacts, the board contacts listed here. And if they have phone numbers, you can reach out to them. There's also a general email address for the countywide organization. So you can also reach out directly to the organization, the general contact information. So this is a good place to go to find what countywides exist and contact information for them.
Awesome. And we rely on anybody to update those. So like Ted, if you are transitioning out to no longer being the president, someone will have to let us know, because we rely on the local groups to tell us what's going on. And that directory also has listings for hundreds and hundreds of lake associations and lake districts in Wisconsin.
Yeah, we do need to do some updating of that list that we just saw for our county.
So we wanted to put this episode out there and really focus on why a countywide. Why should we have a countywide? What are the benefits? And also then what are the considerations if you don't have one and you are considering developing one? So first we wanted to look at the benefits. There's a lot of benefits, and they're very important benefits. So one is that you, instead of maybe one lake or a couple lakes, you can represent large numbers of individuals across the county, representing multiple lakes and rivers. And so you can really, you have a louder voice, and it's good to have those large numbers of people when you are working on issues. You can also look maybe more outwardly instead of inward at one lake, or you're maybe looking just at one water body. Looking out to the county can really help open your eyes to things that are happening at the countywide scale, and help you think more holistically about some issues. It's a great way to collaborate and share across the county. Maybe a lot of different water bodies are dealing with the same thing. And so instead of everyone working separately on these same things, working collaboratively and sharing is a good way to approach those. We also have maybe a lot of different variety of perspectives and opinions across the county, which we also have it listed under the considerations. But it is a benefit because we want a lot of different opinions, right? And perspectives that can help us really get to a better place when it comes to issues that we're dealing with. Eric, did you want to talk about the next one?
Yeah, I mean, we have a slide about this, but county governments really can help you out in many different ways. And so think about when you're operating at the county scale, you're largely going to be partnering with some folks with county government, both staff and elected officials.
Yep, and together you can influence those government organizations. Some things to note is that generally in a lot of the counties and townships in Wisconsin, lake and river riparian owners are paying a significant portion of the total taxes that are paid to that county or the township. Let your voices be heard and help drive positive changes that can benefit the broader group of taxpayers and residents that are concerned about their water bodies. Our lake our county, Rusk, does not have a countywide lake or rivers association. We're planning on doing that in 2026, but what we're going to do is leverage the learnings that we've chatted about in past episodes from the Rusk County Rusk County Wildlife Restoration Association. They don't just do things around lakes and rivers, they do lots of different things. But we want to leverage the things that they've learned because they're a very, very good organization that has really influenced how people get things done from a wilderness protection perspective. And we would like to do a similar thing for the entire county around our water and our watersheds.
One of the things that we've been able to do in Oneida County, because we have the County Lake and Rivers Association, is we've developed some grassroots muscle. If we put out an action alert dealing, for example, with something that's going on in the county planning and development committee or the county board, we can issue a call to action, and we've been able to fill a hearing room on occasion, get people out to testify on behalf of the water resources.
We mentioned that only 22 counties have such an organization, and the reason why is because they don't just sort of manifest themselves. There are some considerations that you have to contemplate before getting involved at the countywide scale. People are usually focused right on their own lake, and so it's harder for them to peel away and look out to the broader landscape. The same pro of having a variety of perspectives and opinions, sometimes at the countywide scale, that doesn't work out. People don't get along, and so they have a hard time reconciling maybe the different opinions. And just like most lake associations and lake districts, this is going to be driven by volunteers. So people need to step up and be ready to actually do this stuff. And even just kind of keeping track of who are the different players, who are the different contacts, that can take time and effort. And when, it's hard enough to do that just within a lake association, when you think about a really large county, that can get fairly complicated. And so many lake groups are really focused on their own challenges, even getting those groups to think at a federated level, to think across watersheds at a county scale. That's not easy. It just doesn't happen all the time. And so that helps explain why we only have maybe 22 counties involved in such efforts.
Yeah, getting things done with an all-volunteer board is a critical item. And we are fortunate in Oneida County to have people on our board who, by and large, are willing to roll up their sleeves and go to work. Still, there are things that we have trouble getting done just because we are all volunteer. There's only so many people and only so much time, and people do have lives. So it's a matter of staying focused on key priorities and having people willing to pitch in.
Yeah, and a good point, because I think at the county scale on this next slide, we've got some points about how you can rely or call upon help from your county government itself. They might actually be wanting to help you out at the countywide scale. Each county has staff, and we'll talk about that later on, that can maybe keep track of those lists of who are the main contacts for the different lake organizations, because the county government has been communicating out to those organizations on a regular basis. Whenever there's a lake district in your county, the county has to make the appointment to the lake district board. So already the county is kind of keeping its fingers on who the different lake districts are and who some of the contacts will be for those lake districts. The county has an elected board to work with. And so you have regular meetings that you can go to and talk about the issues that you're facing. Those land and water offices also have a 10-year plan. You can learn about those plans and figure out ways that maybe, again, a group of lake and river organizations could assist with implementing that plan and getting things done at that scale. Counties are also where the state of Wisconsin has decided to locate the decisions around shoreline zoning and wetland zoning. And so every county has an office of zoning that's dealing with shoreline management issues, sometimes good, sometimes bad, but those are the people that you want to be connecting with. The DNR has also been distributing out to counties base funding to support the Lake Monitoring and Protection Network. So every county is sort of receiving just a small amount of money, it depends on how many lakes and rivers are in the county, to help address lake-related issues. So a countywide group could advise that that decision about how do they want to spend that money. Also, a lot of Wisconsin is fairly rural. Some of the counties that you're looking at on this map, they may have a population, the whole county is 7,000 or 8,000 people. So it may only be at the countywide scale that you find the number of volunteers willing to kind of care and step up and take on conservation issues. Additionally, the state of Wisconsin might often uses counties to organize the Department of Natural Resources functions. One example here would be oftentimes you'll find a county person in the DNR who does conservation warden work. So if there's fisheries management issues or questions around who's enforcing the fishing rules, oftentimes it's the county conservation warden that you're going to connect with. I could hear people saying, well, but we could do this at the watershed scale, and this map here is to contrast watersheds versus counties. The challenge with watersheds is, as you can see on the map, they're often multiple counties in scale. So a lot of the challenges just become even bigger if you're thinking at that scale. It does make sense to think about river water quality issues as being driven by their watershed. But the only place where we see really highly structured watershed groups is usually in the more densely populated areas of the state of Wisconsin, sort of the eastern and southeastern half of the state. So for example, there is a very robust group called the Fox Wolf Watershed Alliance. They have staff and they're managing things at a watershed scale. They're incorporating both the Wolf River and the Fox River, feeding into the Green Bay area. There's millions of people that live in that area, so recruiting volunteers is possible. Similarly, in Southeast Wisconsin, the Rock River Coalition and the Milwaukee Riverkeeper program operate at a watershed scale, but they operate in places where there's 1 million plus people to cultivate volunteers and members from. Out in the rural parts of the state, it really does appear that countywide groups are going to be the function rather than thinking through watershed organizations. This next slide kind of talks about, okay, so how would you organize these things?
And so one thing you want to maybe start thinking about it and looking at other examples is the bylaws, which bylaws are maybe one of the most important things to have as an organization, because this provides your legal structure. It hopefully helps to avoid conflict, answers a lot of questions, establishes procedures for financial management. It describes the board of directors, how they're selected, how many there are, length of terms. It defines committees and so much more. So bylaws is one of those very important pieces that every organization wants to have. And you can find bylaw examples from the countywide organizations. Many of them have them available on their website. And there are various legal options available to minimize your organization's liability and to maximize your opportunities under both Wisconsin's nonprofit corporation law and federal tax exemption statutes. As with any lake association, incorporating involves filing articles of incorporation with the Department of Financial Institutions under Chapter 181. The form can be found online, and the fee to incorporate is only $35. Incorporating protects the individuals managing the organization, and if there's debts or obligations, they're in the name of the corporation. So this is something that we encourage organizations to look into. Without this status, individuals acting on behalf of the group can be held personally liable for the activities of the group. And then another thing regarding structure, or just some important pieces that you would want to think about when developing, or if you're already an organization, is the tax exemption. So being tax exempt allows you to solicit tax deductible donations. And there is a difference between 501c3 and 501c4. So definitely be familiar with those differences. 501c3 contributions are tax deductible for donors. And there's a form to fill out if you want to use up to 20% of your expenditures for lobbying activities. 501c4 contributions are not tax deductible, and those organizations have greater flexibility in the amount they can spend on lobbying. just make sure you pay attention to those differences and look into that more. There's an example here on the slide, just Vilas County Lakes and Rivers Association. They clearly on their website state that they are a 501c3 tax exempt nonprofit corporation. So just another small piece of information that organizations put on their website to make it clearly accessible what type of organization they are.
And
And
structure
our next
also
slide.
relates to your membership. So when you're thinking through both board members or some sort of structure under your articles of incorporation, also be thinking about what does it mean to be a member? How are you going to get members? Where are they going to come from? And we find that across the whole state of Wisconsin, groups vary a lot in terms of how a countywide group tackles this question of membership. Some of them will say, really, we want to be made up of representatives coming from lake associations and lake districts within the county. So it's sort of a federation of local lake organizations. Some other ones are more open to, anyone can be a member. If you care about lakes and rivers in a particular county, come on, write a check, join, be a member, be a volunteer, step up and help us out. It really can vary depending on maybe what the resources are in the county. We have noticed if we look at the counties that have these types of groups, the more formal structure with sort of a federation of organizations tends to exist where there's a smaller number of lakes in the county. So not every county has hundreds or thousands of lakes. Some counties only have a few lakes. And if they all have organizations and they're made up of the members of those organizations tend to be year-round residents, that tends to be a federated type group. Where there's lots and lots of lakes and many smaller lakes that don't even have lake associations, that's where the countywide group tends to be sort of a big umbrella catching all the different activities that could happen within a county. If you're just starting a countywide group, if that's why you're watching this video, my advice to you is not to get really too hung up on this just yet. Your first challenge is to try and find possible volunteers, people who want to step up and help you out to kind of get a countywide group going. And after you spend a couple of years kind of successfully implementing some small programs, recruiting new members, then you can start tackling the question of, okay, what exactly kind of group do we want to form now? As we sort of go from very squishy and nebulous to something that's more structured, that's when you start to face these questions of, do we want to be really open to everybody, or do we want to be a federation of existing organizations? Ted, we're using the example here on the screen about how Oneida County Lakes and Rivers is set up. Can you talk about maybe what went into that decision as far as you know and how it operates today?
Yeah, we go back to 1995, so we have a bit of history, but the backbone of our membership is lake associations, association memberships, group organization memberships, and then anyone is welcome to join as an individual if they want to. And a few years ago, we decided to initiate 2 levels of membership, and neither has any more or less privileges than the other, but we just put on our membership renewal or application form, do you want to be a regular member or a patron member? And the patron member, the fee is higher, 50 instead of 30 for a group or organization, 40 instead of 20 for an individual. And what we found is that probably 75% of the organizations and individuals who join opt for the patron level, which we take that as an affirmation that people think we're doing a decent job. I'm kind of an admirer of the Manitowoc County Lakes Association, the interesting structure that they have. They're a county where there's smaller lakes, and most of the people on the lakes who own property are permanent residents there. They're not vacation seasonal owners. And they essentially have a board of directors that's made up of a representative from each lake. And those liaisons are at their meetings. You'll find generally a representative from each lake at the meeting, and then there'll be an executive board that kind of oversees the whole thing. That's a model that OCLRA, we kind of aspire to, but it's a lot more difficult in our case because so many of the property owners are seasonal, and there are so many lake associations with so many priorities of their own.
So
Yeah, and I
Ted,
think, go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to ask if I wanted to, I could become an individual member of Oneida County Lakes and Rivers Association. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay. And same here, looking at this slide, I also snipped this out of the Washburn County Lakes and Rivers, out of their bylaws. They also have individual family. Every person who is interested in the purpose of this association is eligible to become a member. So it looks like their organization as well is open to anyone who has interest. So it's really up to the organizations and in their bylaws to clearly state who can become a member.
Yeah, and Ted mentioned Manitowoc County. They kind of fit that example of what I was saying, where if it's a small number of lakes and it has year-round residents, then they're going to have more of this federation type. In Oneida County, in contrast, I think there's at least 40 lake organizations in the county. And so how would you kind of bring them all together? You'd almost have to have districts or something like that. It gets even more complicated. So if it is a small number of lakes, yeah, maybe think about that federation model. But if you have a large number of lakes and a large number of smaller lakes, I know in Washburn County, for example, there was one person who really stepped up as part of their countywide group. He lived on a lake where he and his wife were the only people on the lake. So they could not really start a 2-person lake association. And he kind of scratched his head. He said, what can I do? I want to participate. I want to do more stuff. And so he was really a leader in their countywide lake group for a long time, trying to kind of get plugged in to advocate, being an advocate for water resources in Washburn County.
We have in Oneida County, we have probably about 50 lake associations that we feel are substantial enough to wish they were members. We have just north of 30 lake association members, and we do have a membership committee now that's dedicated to seeing how we can pull more of those major lake associations into the fold. And we also have a pretty extensive mailing list of people who live on lakes but don't necessarily live on one that's represented by an association. So we do reach the lakes that don't have formal associations, at least to that extent.
Yeah, that's great. And you mentioned kind of your dues structure here and the revenue that you're raising. And someone might say, well, what do you do with that money? Like, what's the point? And I'm going to guess that you spend it on your program. So on the next slide, we have some ideas of what kind of things countywide groups can tackle. There's a whole bunch of different ideas here. We apologize for the slide with lots of text, but there really are a lot of great examples from around the state of Wisconsin on what a countywide group can do. Those 20 or so groups that exist, some of them are so sophisticated that they produce an annual report that summarizes their activities. And I think we're going to put a link in both on our webpage and on the YouTube channel to an example of a annual report from a countywide group. Part of what they do is sort of what the Wisconsin Lakes and Rivers Partnership does. And what does the Lakes and Rivers Partnership do? We get together to organize the Lakes and Rivers Convention every year, representing pieces from the Wisconsin DNR and local lake organizations, our statewide partner, Wisconsin Lakes, and our office, Extension Lakes. It takes a partnership effort to make an event like that happen. If you want to do something at the county scale, you're going to need that type of partnership. The Wisconsin Lakes and Rivers Partnership also just kind of promotes what other groups are doing, shares out success stories. And a countywide group can do that through their newsletters and through their social media as well. They can kind of amplify maybe what's happening on a smaller scale out to a bigger audience at the county scale. The Lakes and Rivers Partnership also does an annual award competition. We sort of give out awards to recognize excellence in lake organizations. And I know the Manitowoc County group that Ted mentioned, they do that as well. They give out awards at the countywide scale. So there's some things that kind of really make sense to do at that county scale. Ted or Dave, is there anything on this list that you would want to highlight or focus on?
Well, I guess what we aspire to in Oneida County is to actually make a difference on the ground in the amount of pollution that's being prevented from going into lakes. So our key area of focus for a few years now has been shoreline buffers. And we have expanded that now to promoting a program called Lake Steward that's been successful in Minnesota. It's a way of recognizing people who who maintain shoreline buffers or natural shorelines and do various other high impact but inexpensive things that make a difference in protecting the water. So that's something we're working on jointly with Vilas County. And we've got a committee working on that at this point and getting some help from the Minnesota people who have about 50 lake associations involved in their initiative. And another thing that we do is we host a 6-county lakes and rivers meeting that is actually a project of Oneida and Vilas County Lakes Associations and representatives from each of the other 4 counties, which are Iron, Langlade, Lincoln, and Forest. So we put on that program every year. It's been a half-day program. Historically, we're looking into making that a full day with breakout sessions and a little bit more of a complete presentation on lake issues.
Dave, you mentioned, I think, that you wanted to start a countywide group in Sand Lake or in your Sand Lake area in Russ County.
Yep.
What sort of things from this list would you want to take on?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is put together a cohesive group of the lake associations. We don't have any lake districts within Russ County, but lake associations, and have that unified voice across all of the lake associations so we can go to our townships or we can go back up to the county and say, hey, from a lakes and rivers and watershed perspective, these are the things that we care about. And obviously aquatic invasive species, making sure that the lakes are safe for everyone to recreate on and have that unified story across the county. That's one thing we don't have right now. We have a bunch of individual lake associations. We'd like to have that more unified voice going forward.
And I think the last, for me, the last bullet on this slide, the represent and speak for smaller lakes that do not have their own organization. There's thousands and thousands of lakes that do not have their own organization. And how can they learn? How can they network? How can they share? It's because of these countywides. It's through these countywides that they can join and be a member of, and that maybe then their countywide can help represent them if they're dealing with issues at their lake, and help speak for those smaller lakes. So I think that's a really neat one and a really important point.
And I think it's also from those smaller lakes where you find maybe volunteers who are willing to do something that sometimes it's hard to get volunteers from bigger lakes to do. So I'll give the example again from Washburn County. One of the things that the person did, he didn't just join this group. He didn't just sort of pay his dues. He also volunteered to go to county zoning meetings to find out what's going on in county zoning, who's looking to get variances, maybe to build closer to the shore or to take down more vegetation than what the state law allows. And this person then could advocate and say, you know what, maybe the lakes, would not like this. Maybe this isn't great for lake health. But somebody has to step up at these meetings and be there and talk about those issues. And if there is someone out there who's on a smaller lake and they want to volunteer, they want to participate, the countywide group can be an outlet for them to do that type of work.
Another item on this list where Oneida County Lakes and Rivers is getting active is in sponsoring a grant writing workshop. We did that for the first time this year and invited Lake Association leaders to learn about the grants that are available and how to write an effective grant proposal that'll actually pay off in receiving funds. So that's something that we're going to be repeating in the years ahead now.
And I think our last episode focused on grants. Was that our last one? So we had Becky on as our special guest talking about grants from that workshop specifically. So sounded like a very positive workshop. But one thing to take away from this slide, I think, is that there's so many different ideas. And Ted, I think you were mentioning earlier how it's, really being able to focus on just some key priorities is you really want to be successful with those key areas and not take too much on too quickly.
Yeah, focus on, just make a conscious decision that items A, B, C, and D, that's where we're going to focus our almost all of our efforts, and leave everything else alone, because trying to take on too much is a recipe for being generally ineffective and burning out your volunteers.
Great. All right, we are moving on, and we wanted to briefly talk about the importance of building partnerships. A few key relationships we have listed here, potential relationships, are with your county land and water staff, which we've already mentioned multiple times. So definitely that's like the number one place to go if you're thinking about starting a countywide organization. Develop those relationships with your county land and water staff. And I do want to attempt to bring up the County Land and Water website so you can see where those staff are listed. And we will have this linked to the YouTube video as well. So here is the wisconsinlandandwater.org website. And if you go to About Us and Our Members, and then scroll down, there might be an easier way to find this. Scroll down to View Directory. Very slow. Did it work? No. Oh, there we go. Members Directory. So you can filter by county here and find your land and water, your county staff here that you could reach out to. There's email address and a phone number. So definitely reach out to them and develop those relationships. Eric, do you want to talk about the second bullet?
Yeah, maybe the next two. Your local extension educators. Many counties around the state also have a branch, basically, of the University of Wisconsin-Madison identified as their UW-Madison Division of Extension. In Washburn County, for example, there's a woman who is the extension educator in the county who focuses on natural resources issues. And in other parts of the state, we have maybe multi-county natural resource educators. We have people organized almost on watershed scale, but find out who your extension people are. Usually you can go online and search just specifically for your county and find a key contact. There's also other ways to tap into the university as well as local school systems. My example here would be to connect with the school to find out who the high school biology teachers are, because they're often interested in fisheries or water quality type issues, so you can connect with them. The University of Wisconsin also has campuses in different places all around the state. Barron County, for example, still has a small campus, and then you have your tech colleges. So think about higher education as a place where you can find some help to get these things going. All these partnerships are really, the idea is to develop your relational capacity. Think of ways that you don't have to do this completely by yourself, but instead you can partner with some other groups to carry out programs.
And this is just a small sampling of those potential partnerships. So this is definitely not an all-inclusive list, but just a few. So a good place to start. Ted, do you have any organizations that you have really strong partnerships with?
Yeah, we are actively connecting with the River Alliance of Wisconsin, with Wisconsin Lakes. Wisconsin Lakes is a huge one for a county association to be connected with, and also the Wisconsin Wetlands Association.
And I think, Ted, you also maybe work with the Northwoods Land Trust on some programs?
Yes, we do. We actually presented at one of the recent land trust programs. The Northwoods Land Trust is on a very active mission to acquire conservation easements of large properties on water in Oneida and Vilas counties. And they actually cover a 7-county area, but they've been really active in Oneida and Vilas of late.
And I know Dave mentioned sort of the Fish and Wildlife Group in Rusk County, kind of representing that hunting, angling aspect.
Yeah, exactly. And they have been very helpful. In fact, they just did in partnership with one of the lake associations. They had some land where they used to use for rearing ponds, and they don't do that anymore, but they partnered with one of our other lake associations, and that lake association revitalized those rearing ponds this spring and just moved thousands of fish from their rearing ponds into their lakes, which is a chain of lakes within Rusk County.
That's great.
And then just look outwardly across your county, other community organizations, what other potential partnerships exist, doing important work across the county. And of course, look across those county lines to neighboring counties, like we had already mentioned, to make sure that you can learn from other countywide lake and river organizations and develop partnerships there.
It's good also to be connected with your township and county governments. For example, in Oneida County, we have all the township town clerks, the town board members on our mailing list, and likewise all the county supervisors, just so they're aware of what we're doing. They know we're out there.
Great. Thank you. So I think that concludes our countywide chat for this month. Our last chat will feature succession planning and how successful organizations transfer knowledge and transition leadership effectively. So this should be a good one to finish the year with and start off a new year learning about succession planning. Remember to let us know what you think about these monthly chats by completing the feedback form linked in YouTube or on the Extension Lakes website. We appreciate all of your time. Thank you to our guests today, and we'll see you all next month.
Yeah, thank you both.
Thanks all.